Hello and welcome to the spring edition of the Crafted Briefing. We've got an awful lot to be going through, and obviously, as is customary, we'll be recording this session as well and we'll be sending it out. So if you do need to step out, please do so. Today, I am really pleased to be joined by two of my colleagues. So Sophie will be talking about some of the new features that Google has, and Tom will be picking up from Advertising Week Europe about what is happening overall in the advertising space. I'm going to kick off with some quickfire news around these same sorts of topics. So the first one is the power dynamics in ad spend. Over the last several years, there's been quite a lot of conversation over where do advertisers spend their money, what are they trying to achieve with that money, and also obviously with the rise of the digital channels such as social, such as video, how does that play out against perhaps more traditional media spend, linear TV, cinema, etc., and where's that going? Here's, according to WARC, the trends over time. Now, while this is, it looks back at 2024, it's the most recent the data they've produced, but what you can really see there is the social is increasing, carrying up at such a rate, and there are some areas that perhaps are a little bit flat. One thing here which I think is worth noting is while social and video are listed as two different things, so much more of the content on social channels is video that perhaps sometimes that distinction isn't quite as clear as they might think it is. Obviously, everybody likes being first, and certainly when it comes to the big American giants, being first and having the most advertising spend or whatever is something they're always going to covet. Recently, eMarketer said that in their forecast for this coming year, 2026, that actually Meta would be attracting more advertising spend than Google. Now, that's a real seismic shift. For us, I think we see, and you can see where they've sort of extrapolated those numbers from, with the light blue there being the rise of Meta. And it's mainly because they view that Meta is going to be rising at a faster rate than Google and making up what has historically been a sort of Google dominated. I was always the first on a media plan, and Meta lagging behind. Now, when we're looking at this, for me, it's about sort of what do we think that shift might be from, and that growth, and are advertisers going to be pushing into it? This is a really interesting recent stat from Ofcom, which is about the fact that adult social media users are much less actively posting, whether sharing, whether commenting, whether just interacting with what they're seeing on social, than they were last year. I think this is down from sort of about mid 60% down to under 50% only in a year. It is, I think, that trend that we're seeing. And what that is that people are using the platforms differently. Within social now, as I said, more and more of the content, more and more of the time that people are spending in social is a video-based. It's almost like it's entertainment. And this, I think, means that there's been this sort of steady landscape of Google first, Meta second, and sort of the others distant third is starting to show signs of shifting. For us, we use Meta or other social channels much more in that storytelling, awareness, because the videos as well are quite often much more native to the experience within that platform. So if you're viewing Reels, a reel comes up, it might be sponsored, it might be advertising, but usually the format, the style is much more in keeping. And then obviously so much more of advertising on social is actually creator based. So that might be that creators are producing native content and that's being promoted through paid advertising. However, Google has got twofold. You've got the search side, which is receiving intent, whether that's in AI mode, AI overviews, or obviously traditional keyword search. And then they do have YouTube. There are a lot of stats around YouTube showing the viewership is actually rivaling linear TV. Now YouTube is more used on TV sets than it is actually on other devices. However, that ad experience on YouTube is still a bit more like an ad break would be on TV. So that the feel of them, they're often not quite so native. They may be a little bit different in terms of their style than you have more on native platforms. For us, it's about knowing where's the audience and what are we trying to achieve. But certainly if you're thinking about video in your advertising campaigns, you're thinking about what are we trying to do. If it's more emotive, social will always be increasing. If it's more transactional and from a business point of view, probably that more weighted towards Google. Obviously, if we're looking at where to spend money, one of the pieces there is about evolving attribution. Now, one thing that has been a very fair criticism of Meta over time is the definition of what it uses as attribution. And a portion of that is sometimes just they've labeled things in a way that other channels don't. They also are, shall we say, quite expansive in how they wish to see attribution, that because you viewed an ad, even if it's over 7, 10, 30 days previous, sometimes they can include that into the potential conversions of the ad. And what they're doing is they're aligning some of both their actual naming conventions, but also things like click-through ads with other ad platforms, and critically things like Google Analytics, which most marketers would view as this is what I'm getting to my website. So what is the outcome that I'm expecting? Practically, what we see is there will be a little bit more information there between the creative performance and the on platform, and also then what obviously you see on your website, and sort of consistency there. For us, we tend to view holistically. So, our ad team, we will still look at some of the similar metrics in terms of overall performance, but this just gives us that ability to dive in just that little bit easier. Another feature in this environment that Google is doing is Search Live. So this is basically looking at interactive video and voice conversations with search. I would say that there have been portions of this, for instance, within the Google app, you've been able to use things like Google Lens for a very long time. I think they're trying to sort of, a combination of rebrand and, reinvent some of the existing things, again, as a new user experience. Exactly whether this is a thing that users really go into, I don't know. I think, behavior-wise, one of the problems that Google has is almost like we're so attuned to using that kind of, interface. That doesn't mean this isn't a new surface that Google has. And ultimately, it's another way that they can have, advertising options around it. One thing I haven't mentioned AI yet, but certainly, as with all good briefings and all good knowledge shares, it's going to be one of those topics. And one thing that we're seeing again recently is in this period where AI has often been part of the conversation around platforms such as Claude, such as ChatGPT, and a third-party thing. I've said before in the briefing that AI will become part of everything rather than a separate thing. And what we're starting to see over the last sort of year or so, and really kind of getting a little bit more fleshed out, is that the CMS, content management system, the thing that powers most of organizations' platforms and websites, they're starting to bring that AI native experience in, rather than it be something like you would go off to a thing like ChatGPT and then bring that information to the website in a more traditional experience. Luckily for all of you and for us, we have produced a labs piece on this, looking at how the major web platforms are choosing their own route. For some of these, they are choosing it by pushing out updates, which means that the AI is sort of almost like part of the experience, things like content by Kentico. And then we've got others where, such as Embraco, where they're keeping that the CMS itself is there, but it's allowing you to be extensible and bring in the tool of choice depending on what you want. So if you are obviously thinking about the CMS experience, thinking about web platforms, this will be content that will be coming out. I'm now going to hand over to Sophie, who's going to be talking about Google's AI Max and what the future with this product is going to look like.
Thanks, Ian. This month, it was confirmed that in September, dynamic search ads, automatically created assets, and broad match campaigns will be upgraded to AI Max. Since its rollout last year, the adoption of AI Max has been mixed, but today I'm going to talk about why the new feature is important and what the future looks like. To understand where we're going, it's always useful to look at where we started. In the 2000s, search was all about visibility. It was human-led, it was manual, and focused on a race to the top of the search page. By the 2010s, we shifted to a hybrid model, and it was focused on clicks and traffic. The management was balanced between manual changes and automation. Today, in the 2020s, we have entered the era of AI-led search. We're no longer just looking for traffic. We're optimizing for conversions and ROAS through algorithmic bidding. The narrative from Google is that user behaviour is changing. Longer searches, more complex queries, what we call a move to conversational search. And it means that users are more likely to search for exactly what they're interested in. For example, instead of searching for kids' boots, it could mean that the search would change to best navy waterproof boots for a toddler who can't tie their shoelaces. The unpredictable nature of these conversational searches means that it's a shift from simply matching to a keyword, and it means it's more about predicting user intent. While AI Max is simply an option within search campaigns, and not a campaign type in its own right, it sets the tone for a keywordless future. Positioned as an upgrade, it's really an opportunity to test a new way of working. Using standard search as a precision tool and AI Max as an intelligence layer that sits on top of it. With change, there's opportunity, and one of the opportunities here is that it's consistent with changes in SEO and GEO, with a focus on thematics over specific keywords, meaning a collaborative approach between specialisms is more important than ever. AI Max determines intent based on your keywords, landing pages, and user behaviour. But it isn't all or nothing. There are layers to its implementation, meaning that you can test and gradually roll out features, such as Ad Creative, where AI Max will generate custom headlines from your website in real time, and Final URL Expansion, where AI Max will direct users to the most relevant page on your site. All of these features means that your campaigns can move beyond what we believe to be effective and create incremental conversions. The dynamic nature of AI Max ultimately supports growth. Q4 is the advertising Olympics. It's where the best of the best come out to play. This advert from Google caught my eye over Christmas and left a lasting impression.
Compliment them, make them feel special. Feels like he's still here with me.
Google is inviting users to search like never before. It's a carefully crafted nudge towards conversational search, with the main takeaway for advertisers being that we too need to adapt and run our search campaigns like never before. What does it mean for you in the short term? It could mean more search terms that are grouped under other search terms. It could mean less detailed reporting, potential cost implications through trial and error, predictive pricing, changing KPIs, and more. But change is inevitable. Since launch in 2000, the platform has constantly changed, and each change creating more data points and more opportunity to maximise and the ability to mould user behaviour. Interesting, even AdWords started out on a CPM model, much like ChatGPT. As features we've known are consolidated and behaviours shift from traditional search results to a combination of search and engagement with AI overviews and AI mode, there is a lot to be excited about. It means that our role moves from being a campaign operator to an architect of systems. The future will be focused more on auditing health signals through accounts, through server-side tracking and offline conversion imports, as well as creative excellence by branching outside of search alone with more video diversity, and ultimately setting the strategic guardrails for the platform to learn from. For example, managing brand exclusions, negative themes, and URL exclusions. AI provides the speed, but we provide the direction. And if you have questions about AI Max and the rollout in platform, please get in touch. I'm now going to hand over to Tom, who's going to go through highlights from Advertising Week Europe.
Thanks, Sophie. Advertising Week Europe is one of the biggest advertising and marketing conferences in the UK. Set in London at 180 Studios, so a fantastic venue, and full of great marketing and branding knowledge. Huge event with a dozen or so stages and speakers who represent the biggest brands like Diageo and LinkedIn, people at the top of their game in the marketing world, but also the odd celebrity and content creator talking about their own branding journeys. Today, I'm not going to focus on the celebrity element, but actually on the things that make a difference to the work that we do for clients and what stood out to me as a practitioner. So the first talk that I'd like to cover is called Welcome to the Sound On era, which was a panel discussion hosted by Spotify. They stressed that audio is a great way to reach your audience. Social channels can be chaotic and visually cluttered, whereas audio is ironically less noisy. It's also being redefined as a channel. So what's traditionally thought of as 30-second radio adverts with annoying jingles now encompasses music, audiobooks, podcasts, and video podcasts. Audio accounts for approximately 25% of media consumption, so that's up to 4 hours a day, with around 2.5 of those being ad-supported. It's a great channel to combat scrolling fatigue and engage with users when they're in an emotionally engaged state because they're actively choosing playlists or podcasts and are locked in. People are leaving sound-off platforms and seeking sound-on environments. So Spotify conducted a report which surveyed over 5,000 responders from consumers, advertisers, and industry experts. 86% of the Spotify users surveyed in the UK silenced videos on other platforms to listen to music, podcasts, or audiobooks instead. AI is actually changing the platform too, empowering engagement, turning what was a passive consumption medium into emotional engagement and action. 67% of those surveyed would use voice commands to engage with an ad, even if their screen is off. And that actually includes actions such as add to cart off the back of an audio ad. This also matches demand from the advertiser space, with 82% of brands and agencies surveyed keen to explore shoppable audio ads via voice interactions. So watch this space. Spotify also highlighted that there's been a 45% increase in streams since voice requests were rolled out last year. This was actually an enhancement of their AI DJ feature launched in 2023. Definitely a further step towards increased interactivity in the platform. So here are my key thoughts on how brands can unmute their strategy. First off, define the role of audio from the start. What do you want it to deliver in terms of sparking an emotional response, reinforcing a message, and creating outcomes? You should also reflect the moment the listener's in, with nodding back to the favourable opinion towards dynamic ad personalisation. If you align with the user's mood and daily routine, for example, exercising, meal prep, relaxation, you can increase relevance and keep users' attention. And that extends to podcasts as well. So make it feel native to the presenter's style and the tone and feel of the podcast. By doing that, you're actually aligning with the user's own choice to engage with that podcast. It's clearly content that resonates well with them. So make sure your ad doesn't jar with that. Graham Norton used a great example of that on his talk, where he talked about his own podcast and how they align the agony aunt format of that to their sponsor brands and pick user examples that fit nicely within that space. So really just attempting to make it feel like part of the show. When you're creating audio ads, think long-term, not just one-off messaging. So if you build a recognizable audio signature, it will then have a cumulative effect over time. So that could be a distinctive voiceover, a consistent genre of audio, or maybe a repeatable sonic signature, a modern version of those jingles. You can also create ideas that work well without visuals. So obviously it's an audio-first format, and many will be using screenless devices or simply focusing elsewhere while listening. It is also worth remembering that often visuals will show with your ads, and that can actually be a powerful tool, especially people listening on TVs. We were proud to include audio in a branding campaign for Girl Guiding last year, helping the public to understand that girls can do anything. So Spotify was used to bridge the gap between the physical and digital world. So we certainly made sure that they worked well without visuals, but also built the ads in a way that created an immersive campaign across channels. So through digital billboards, social media, digital audio, display, and many other channels, we wanted to create an immersive campaign that really each touch point built upon the last. The next talk I want to focus on is around accessible advertising, as they called it, the underutilized effectiveness lever. So this is one of my favorite talks and was hosted by a host of huge brands, including Diageo, Procter & Gamble, and Unilever. It was also chaired by the ISBA, so that's the Incorporated Society of British Advertisers. They led with the stat that 18 million people in the UK have a sight or hearing disability, a huge audience. But actually, ensuring ads are accessible is often an afterthought or not considered at all. So if you don't make your advertising accessible, you could be disengaging a significant part of your audience. They also referenced a Samsung study that found that 55% of people who have accessibility needs feel that brands don't cater to them, but 76% of those people would remain loyal to a brand that did. This audience has incredible spending power. So research by the University of Bristol found that the spending power of disabled households in the UK, often referred to as the purple pound, is now 446 billion a year. So here are some foundations for improving ad accessibility. There's 3 key ways to make your ads accessible. So you can use captions and subtitles. Open captions are burned into the ad, whereas closed can be turned on and off. For video, you can use audio descriptions, so making them accessible to blind audiences. And equally, for images, you can use alt text. When you're creating alt text, make these descriptive. So, for example, if you're showing a graph, a weak approach would be graph showing sales over time, but something like line graph showing a 24% increase in sales from January to August helps the user gain a much better understanding. You can also include descriptive text in your ad copy. That's preferable to putting it in the image. Again, much easier for things like screen readers to interpret. The same approach applies to hashtags. If you capitalize individual words, you help screen readers interpret them effectively. When given the proper attention, those accessibility features can elevate your brand. The most interesting part of the talk for me was the talk by the woman from Bailey's, who not only leads digital engagement for that brand as part of Diageo, but actually leads their accessibility initiatives as well. So a great combination is something that she was able to put into practice. So Bailey's partnered with RNIB to create a guide on how to create delicious audio descriptions. This campaign did really well on brand uplift studies, and didn't just have an SEO benefit, but was also increased findability by LLMs. So close your eyes. What do you picture when you hear this? A festive display of Bailey's Irish cream bottles, perfect for holiday celebrations and cozy gatherings. So is this what you were picturing? That's the machine-generated alt text for this image. Not entirely wrong, but missing the point of the ad. So Bailey's went a step further and gave their image descriptions extra attention.
A pair of homemade tiramisu martini cocktails sit on a table in a bright kitchen, waiting just for you. The indulgent cocktails have a rich mix of dark coffee and creamy chocolate sitting below a layer of thick mascarpone with deliciously indulgent Baileys mixed in. Each drink is finished with dark chocolate shavings, giving this drink a delightfully desserty twist. Go on, grab one.
As you've heard, this is a more natural, detailed approach than the auto-generated alt text, and allow Baileys to include their CTAs in a natural way. Here are some tips to making accessibility accessible. If you include accessibility in the brief from the start, it's not a costly thing to add, and actually much cheaper than trying to reverse engineer it after the fact. If you have ads that would otherwise have no voiceover, audio descriptions are particularly essential. If you just have dramatic imagery and maybe a stirring music soundtrack, then that often doesn't leave users with much clue about the content of the ad. For neurodivergent people, you can simplify ad content and reduce clutter, helping them to interpret it better. And in general, that's just good practice for advertising anyway. And finally, it's tempting to use AI tools as a shortcut, and they can be a great starting point, but it's still important to include a human element to make sure that your descriptions are emotive and human sounding. As I mentioned, the talk was chaired by the ISBA, and they've actually worked with other industry bodies to set up the Ad Accessibility Network. They have a great website which will outline things like business cases, so to help you sell the process internally, information on best practice, and practical advice on taking action. So the last set of talks that I want to talk about are the B2B opportunity. So LinkedIn hosted a whole host of B2B talks in the event, and this focuses on a panel discussion that they chaired, and also an individual talk by Mimi Turner. So they open with a stat which was quite impactful, which is that $1 in every $10 of revenue is spent on B2C ads, whereas only $1 in $155 of revenue is spent on B2B ads. So a huge gulf of where that marketing focus is going. Their collective measures report actually highlighted that most decision makers use 10 or more channels to gather information before making a purchase. This compares to around 6 for B2C, so much more involved decision making. They might look at advertising, but also review white papers, watch product videos, and analyze reviews. So given that B2B typically has less channel budget than B2C, is budget being spread too thin? As well as this trend towards self-service research, LinkedIn highlighted other key areas of B2B research behaviour. The first was the central role of trust and authenticity. So that could actually outweigh attributes such as product features, market position, and general quality statements as a decision factor in their research. Effectively, buyers put great value on their decision being defensible, and authentic recommendations from peers and similar companies are the best way to achieve this. To achieve authenticity, it's important to remember the following. There's a trust gap. So roughly 58% of B2B buyers don't believe the claims made by vendors, even if they've recently bought from them. It's also the case that recommendations from colleagues and peers are more than 3 times as influential as products that just promise to be better or cheaper. It's also good to prioritise authenticity over polish on occasion. So buyers typically prefer raw content such as user reviews, forum discussions, and peer stories over polished corporate collateral, and they're that much more verifiable. Also, and perhaps unsurprisingly, AI is changing the buying process. Consumers now use AI tools to compare feature sets and evaluate supplier proposals, so quite complex tasks that the AI can help them to simplify. 94% of buyers also use LLMs before even talking to a sales team. So they're compressing the discovery phase, and AI answers are basically becoming the shortlist for that process. For B2B, that means it's important to focus on GEO and on paid visibility in AI results, influencing decisions in an increasingly fragmented buyer journey. Finally, awareness helps. So you're 20%, according to LinkedIn's research, more likely to be bought when all the major decision makers in the buying group know you from the start. It's really important that you reach users across multiple job roles rather than just the 1 or 2 that you consider to be the decision maker. In summary, our opinion is that for B2B, you need to be present and active where your buyers are. The B2B customer journey is more complex, involves more channels and more people. They're gathering information before they even speak to you. So get on your buyers' day one list by being active and relevant in their category. This actually isn't too dissimilar from B2C in the way that brand trust, relatability, and peer recommendations hold weight in buying decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Really interesting to hear what Advertising Week Europe is showing for the potential future. That's all from us here at the Spring Briefing. Thank you for watching. We'll be sending out the video recording as usual. Obviously, if you've got any questions at all, follow up with your client teams or contact us. We'll then be able to get back to you and talk about how some of these new things are potentially affecting and you can take advantage of them.